Right now you're listening to me on the Zoom H4n, and I bought mine, this one right here, back in 2012, but it was originally released in 2009. And there's a good chance that the H4n might not look too foreign to you because it's been a great audio recorder choice for anybody for a really long time, especially since it was released right at that time when podcasting and DSLR video production were starting to take off and become much more accessible to the average person. It's an incredibly versatile recorder with built-in microphones, but these are very prone to plosives, so I'll pop a little windscreen on there just to protect from that. If I don't want to use the built-in microphones, I can connect an XLR mic or a 1/4-inch instrument input, and in fact, especially in the mid-2010s, like 2014 or so, I built a lot of music production and podcast setups for myself and others based solely around the H4n as the main recorder. And overall, this thing is just really awesome. Even though there are newer versions and newer options and a lot more options out there now, this really set the bar pretty high for what you would expect from a portable audio recorder, especially at a lower, more affordable price point. And now this is the Zoom H1 Essential, which is essentially a more compact, simple, and super practical version of the H4n. It is still prone to plosives though. So I'm gonna pop this little windscreen on here just to avoid any issues there. There are no XLR inputs on here, but you do still have a built-in stereo mic and you do still have a 3.5mm line input. And because this is a bit more modern than the H4n, the H1 Essential is a 32-bit float recorder, which basically means all you need to do is press record and then you're all set. There's no need to worry about getting levels right or anything like that. I guess just try to tame your plosives and you're good to go. And the reason I want to share this with you today is because I really feel like this is a Swiss Army knife of audio production tools, and it's just so incredibly useful and affordable and capable, and I hope I am capable of explaining that to you. So let's dive into it. First, talking about the design and build quality. I took the windscreen off, so you're still listening to it. I really love the design of the H1 Essential. Zoom gear, though, is always a little bit confusing when it comes to build quality because usually on any Zoom product, some parts feel incredibly high quality while others feel super cheap. But here's the good news is that back when I was a digital media teacher, I had like 20 H1Ns, and the H1N was the predecessor for the H1 Essential, but it wasn't 32-bit float, and it was actually a little more cheesy and plasticky built. But I had like 20 of these things or more in my classroom for students to use. It was just in a box on my desk, and kids would take them for projects and stuff all the time. They held up for many, many school years and still worked and still got the job done. So that means even though the build quality is not the most robust thing in the world, I don't think it's going to bust if you use it in the real world. These are very capable recorders, and you just gotta, take care of it like you would anything else, and then they last a pretty long time. Now, unfortunately, as you might hear right here, the plastic body does lend itself to a bit of handling noise. So if you're just using the recorder, if you're just holding it and you're not moving your hand all around it, it's completely fine. Like I can move this around, I could interview someone, it's gonna be good to go. If you start like rubbing it or moving your hand around it, then you're gonna start hearing some of that handling noise when you're using the built-in microphone. Obviously, that wouldn't affect anything if you had a lavalier microphone connected and this was like in a pocket or something. But even though this overall build quality is light and plasticky, there are still some, this is the Zoom confusing thing, there are still some really nice elements that I'm like surprised this includes for the price. First and foremost, this display is super bright and crisp and very high contrast. So it's very easy to read, very easy to see. The fact that this even has a built-in display at all is really cool. The buttons are nice and clicky, and the whole interface is just really easy to use and really easy to go through. There's also a metal 1/4-20 mount on the back, which is a huge step up from the plastic mount that was on the back of the original H1Ns, because those ones, like the H4n right here, has a metal mount. The H1 Essential has a metal mount. Those H1Ns and some of the like even older than those Zoom recorders just had little plastic mounts here. And no matter how careful you are, those plastic mounts will strip almost immediately. Those threads will just break off and wear down, and then you can't mount the recorder to anything, which is a huge bummer because it has a built-in microphone, so you can pop on a handle like this. I can pop it on a desktop stand like this, or even put it on a boom arm, and that's really cool because these work really well on stands and boom arms positioned just out of frame. It's not a hyper directional mic, so like, if I put it back here, it's not going to pick up the same sound as if I'm really close to it. It's going to sound the best if I'm, 6 to 12 inches from the microphone, just like normal. But if I were to let's hold this out of frame here, if I were to pretend that this is a boom mic just right out of frame, this is very usable audio. And it's really cool to be able to have a tiny recorder that can be essentially a boom microphone in some cases. But that was always a problem before because the stupid little thing would strip out and not be able to be used. So I'm really glad they upgraded it to a metal quarter 20 mount. That sounds like a small detail, but that mount amounts to a huge boost in flexibility and usability for the recorder. Now there is also a headphone and line output if you want to monitor, and there is, which I was surprised, I didn't kind of realize this was there, there's a speaker built in on the back to review your recordings, which is not the loudest, you know, you're not gonna like blast some sick beats from that speaker or anything, but it's a really, really helpful thing to have to review your recordings, just kind of get an idea of how things are sounding. And it's about as good as you could possibly expect a tiny speaker on something like this to be. And another thing that is very cool, just like every Zoom recorder I've ever used, it does not have built-in batteries. It just runs off of 2 AAA batteries, and you can even go in the menu and select which type of AAA batteries you're using to maximize your battery life, which should be about 10 hours. Now, of course, this is an audio recorder, so let's talk about its audio recording performance. You've been listening to it throughout this video, but the whole process is basically foolproof because it is a 32-bit float recorder. With the H4n, you have your record levels to set, and so when I was using the internal mics and I switched to my condenser mic at the beginning of this video, I had to change the levels and make sure those were matching and make sure nothing's peaking. This is 32-bit float, which basically eliminates all of those problems. There's nothing else to consider other than stereo versus mono. So what stereo does, since you have these 2 microphones here, you have a left and a right microphone, left and right channel, now I can move around the recorder and my voice should be going side to side on the stereo track. That is, it's not great for spoken word. If I'm doing a podcast and I'm moving around and I'm switching sides of somebody's headphones or somebody's speakers, that is super annoying and not fun to listen to at all. But it's great for instruments a lot of times if you want to really feel like you're hearing the instrument in a space, you want to hear the dynamics of whatever it is, guitar, drums, whatever instrument you're miking up. Stereo is usually the way to go. Now mono, this right here is the way to go for spoken word because now I can move around the microphone, or the microphone can move around me, and I shouldn't be moving around in your headphones or on your speakers. So stereo for instruments, mono for spoken word, and the really cool part is there's just the stereo mono button right on the front, and that's all you need to press to switch between those two. It is super easy. The power button also has a hold function, so if I slide that up there, now if I press any of these buttons, the screen will just say hold, and basically what that means is I can't accidentally press any of these buttons, end a recording, change a setting, which is really great if you're using this, like you plug a lavalier microphone into it and you put the recorder in somebody's pocket, you can put it on hold and that way it's not going to get bumped and stop recording in like the middle of a wedding or the middle of an important scene. Or if you're just using it and you hand it to someone who's not familiar with audio recorders and they're going to like accidentally press a button inadvertently, they're not going to mess up your recording because everything is locked. This has been a feature on a lot of recorders, including Zoom ones, for a very long time. Super glad to see it here. Now, when it comes to these built-in microphones, I do think that they are surprisingly capable. Zoom stuff usually has pretty good audio quality. I'm very paranoid about plosives right now, and the H1 Essential only comes with the essentials, so you do not get a pop filter. Like the H4n came with this little handle you could put on the back, comes with a little case, comes with a windscreen. This doesn't come with any of that. So I want to make sure when I'm using these built-in microphones that I am using a windscreen so that way it doesn't affect the audio quality in terms of plosives or anything like that. But you're not just limited to using these built-in microphones, which as you can see, I'm not using right now because this would sound terrible. I'm using a lavalier microphone connected to the H1 Essential, and this is the lavalier that came with my Zoom F2, which is a little recorder that I will be talking about in a little bit because this is also really cool, really interesting, and this is an interesting relationship between these two right here. On Facebook in 2009, it would have been marked "It's complicated." So at this point, what this means is that the H4n now it can just sit sort of as a standalone recorder. I could put the hold switch on, put it in my pocket, and now I just have this lavalier microphone, which I could also probably even take a better effort to conceal or position to get better sound. And now I don't have to have anything or just rely on these built-in microphones here. So that's a lot of versatility. This is also a line input, so you could put like an instrument or a mixer or something into the H1n and record from there. And that's actually, I mentioned earlier, the first podcasting setups I put together. That's how I did a lot of those because it was a pre-Rodecaster era. I would usually have microphones going into a mixer, the mixer didn't have built-in recording, so then the output would go into an H4n, and that's what would actually record the podcast. And you could do that same type of thing right here with the H1 Essential. And that's just, again, there's a lot of versatility packed into this little recorder. And that versatility goes even further because there's a USB-C port on the side of the H1 Essential that can be used to power it or to use it as a USB microphone, just what I'm doing right now. I'm not even recording on here. I'm recording into QuickTime on my computer, which is pretty awesome because as soon as you connect the USB cable, the recorder will ask you if you want to use it as a USB mic, and if so, if you're using it with a computer, a PC, or a Mac, or if you want to use it with a mobile device, you can also use it with mobile devices as well. And then it will just show up as an available source in whatever software you're using, and now you can use it as a USB microphone. This is something that's been possible with Zoom recorders in the past. You can use them via USB, but it's always been a little bit of a clunkier process, and some of the older ones like this has mini USB, some have micro USB. This is just a very streamlined, simple process that all revolves around USB-C. And if you were wondering, even though I wasn't recording into QuickTime, I am recording now because it can do dual outputs. You can record internally into the H1 Essential while also using it as a USB microphone, and that way you have the best of both worlds. I don't know if you would need that situation, but if you want extra redundancy or something, you're totally able to do that. Now, I think the next really important thing to talk about is that 32-bit float audio. It's so important they put the little sticker right here. So what does that actually mean, and what does that enable you to do? Basically, once you import your files from the micro SD card, which you can do through an adapter by connecting the SD card to your computer, or through just USB. When you connect the USB to your computer, you can transfer them that way. Once they're in your computer, you can then add them to your audio editor of choice. And if you create a 32-bit project, I'm using Audition right here. The amazing thing about 32-bit float is the added dynamic range, which means you can save audio that otherwise would have been clipped, and you can also boost audio that would have otherwise been too low without the clipping still sounding distorted and without the low audio sounding like it has too much noise or hiss. This is a loud sample right here! And right after it is a short, quiet sample. This is me talking weirdly whispery quietly. This is a loud sample right here! And right after it is a short, quiet sample. This is me talking weirdly whispery quietly. Now, even though it is very hard to clip audio with 32-bit float, some people say it's impossible, but I don't know if I totally buy that. It doesn't mean you should ignore, I implore you not to ignore, proper positioning and mic technique, because it is still possible to have things sound bad. If you just have something that's blowing crazy wind or crazy plosives, they might not be clipped technically, but they're still going to sound pretty bad. So you always want to pay attention to your mic technique and your mic positioning, even if you have something really cool like 32-bit float. And of course, 32-bit float, as awesome as it is, everything I'm talking about, it applies to any 32-bit float recorder, not just the H1 Essential. It applies to every other Zoom recorder that has 32-bit float and every other thing from other brands too. So it's not exclusive to this. 32-bit float is just something that's been really cool recently-ish in the audio world. But now I think the last thing to look at is how the H1 Essential, kind of like I hinted at earlier, measures up to the Zoom F2, because in a lot of ways, these are the same recorder-ish, sort of, kind of, in a different form factor. The confusing part to me is honestly the pricing between the two of these. So the H1 Essential has an MSRP of $100. The F2 has an MSRP of $150. For the regular version, this is actually the Bluetooth version, which has an MSRP of $200. So this one was actually twice as much as this one. And what Bluetooth means is you can connect it to your phone via an app to control the recorder, monitor your recordings, format the SD card, go through all the menu, all that kind of stuff, and stop recording remotely, which is pretty cool. I just don't understand why the H1 is cheaper, because this feels way more fully featured in a lot of ways, especially because it has built-in mics and a built-in display. You kind of don't need the Bluetooth app in a lot of ways if you have a built-in display, because what I use the app for a lot is checking battery life, formatting the memory card, maybe playing with some menu settings. I can do all that right here. And then I also have microphones built in. The F2 has definitely the advantage of a more compact form factor. It has this metal clip that it comes with, so it's really good for being discreet when placed on someone. If you need to use it for something like a wedding where maybe this form factor not necessarily ideal. And of course, you could even use it for things like, broadcast or short film production where you need to hide this on an actor or an anchor or something and have it be very discreet. I even actually made a video recently where I talked about how I use this for mic'd up sports videos, and in that I was explaining, using hockey as the example, how easy it is to clip this inside someone's hockey gear where it's totally out of the way. You can mic them up and this isn't going to get damaged or get in the way of the person playing the sport. The F2 does have a locking mic and headphone jack, so that's really nice because when you have it connected to somebody, that means that it can't be in their pocket and they accidentally pull and disconnect the cable. This does not have a locking jack, so when you have your lavalier, it could get pulled and disconnected. The F2, since it doesn't have the screen or built-in mics, it does have longer battery life, so its 2 AAA batteries will get you 15 hours. The 2 AAA batteries on the H1 will get you 10 hours. But internally, when it comes to recording, the H1 is pretty much exactly the same. So it's the same 32-bit float. This is identical in that there's nothing else to do. You turn it on, you press record, there's a hold switch. That's about it. So this has a lot more to offer for $50 less, for it's 2/3 the price. I don't know. So I guess the F2 is really the way to go if you are planning to use a lavalier mic most of the time, because the super compact form factor and locking connectors make that really easy and discreet. This is not necessarily ideal for that, although it does work really well. I still, honestly, the $50 price difference for the basic version of this, I just don't understand it. And the $100 price difference, double the price for the Bluetooth version, it just makes no sense to me. But wrapping things up with all that in mind and looking at the H1 Essential and everything it can do, I really don't think you can have any complaints about it. It is such a cool, fully featured recorder at such an affordable price that even, the plastic body or the mics that are susceptible to plosives, just figure out ways to work around it and you have this awesome tool, this awesome recorder. I think that it's a great way to instantly add a ton of versatility to your audio recording setup, and I would genuinely encourage anyone who regularly does any sort of audio and video production to take a look at the H1N if you don't already have something like this in your toolkit, because in a lot of ways, I kind of think of it as an audio Swiss Army knife, because the thing about a Swiss Army knife is it has all these different tools that can do all these different things. And while they might not necessarily be the best possible versions, like this is probably not the best knife I could get or the best pair of scissors or the best screwdriver I could possibly get, having all of these things together in one place is incredibly valuable. And same goes with the H1 Essential. It might not be the best microphone, the best recorder, the best of any one specific thing, but having all of those things together in one place does make this an incredibly valuable tool. And speaking of things that have incredible value, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And if you do want to learn a little bit more about the Zoom F2 and 32-bit float recording, I do have my full review right here, along with that mic'd up sports video, which is really fun. Just check it out. You'll probably take some cool ideas away from it. That was such a fun video to make, and there's some cool stuff to learn in it.